Hello and good evening, everybody. Welcome to this evening's meeting of the Audit and Governance Committee. It's Tuesday, the 16th of November. And for those of you that may be a little bit surprised to see us working remotely this evening, there are two reasons for that. One, we've had guidance from the Director of Public Health that any non-decision making sessions of the council be now returned to remote meetings. And as this evening's meeting is not a decision making session, it were appropriate to do it. And secondly, I've got a little health issue, so I may occasionally be having to switch my camera off. We have one apology, and that's an apology from Councillor Carr, who will be here slightly late, and Councillor Mason will be having to turn his camera off, though he will still be observing the meeting at around 6 p.m. Is that correct, Councillor Mason? Yeah, thank you. The first item on the agenda is declarations of interest. Are there any additional declarations of interest not already on your register relevant to tonight's meeting? No, thank you. The second item is the minutes of previous meetings, and they are the 29th of September meeting. And I have had correspondence from one of the public participants, Mr. Mendes, who's asked whether he could make certain amendments to the minutes, and I will read out his statement, which I'm prepared to accept because it does not make a material difference, and he did send me a copy of the transcript of his 3 minutes. Mr. Mendes inquired as to whether the use of settlement agreements as outlined in the proposed guidance were exceptional as stated. I think there was a spelling mistake there. Or if they would be more routine. He's asked for routine to be added, noting the reference to a budget for these payments. Regarding Make It York, he noted that it was good for the committee to intervene and asked the committee, and this is what he's like to add, to seek an explanation as to why the missing reports were not chased up and whether the council knew if Make It York was in breach of the rules relating to TCOG companies in this period. He's forwarded that to our Democratic Services Officer, and I've had the opportunity to discuss it with the Monitoring Officer, and we all feel that there's nothing there that was not in his submission, and I'm therefore inclined to accept them if members are too. Fantastic. Are there any other changes that members would like to suggest for the minutes of the 29th of September? If not, we'll accept them with those amendments as a true record. The second lot of minutes are the minutes of the 20th of October. And again, Mr. Mendes has asked whether NDRs could be changed to NNDRs, and the words "when auditing York schools" to be added. And when he mentioned gateways were not being used correctly, he wants "but being" added to treat it as a tick box exercise. Again, I don't think that that's a material change, and it's certainly not any different to what he said in his transcript. So, if members are inclined to accept those corrections, I'm prepared to add them. Councillor Fisher, you've raised your hand.
Very minor one, but in page 10, paragraph 2, says they felt the council lacked behind other councils. I think it should be lagged. I think it just doesn't make sense if you put lack. So can we just correct that? So then it's clear what Gwen said.
Yeah, no, that's lovely. Thank you very much. And I'm sure Robert will make that amendment. Are there any other alterations or amendments that members would like to add, change? No. In which case, with those amendments, we'll accept that as a true and accurate account of the minute of the 20th of October. I forgot to say at the beginning, for the benefit of those watching, this is available on YouTube and will be kept for watching now or at some time in the future. And also that, I forgot completely what I was going to say then. Anyway, not to worry. Councillor Webb.
Apologies, Chair. I think I just missed the points from the minutes of that meeting, but just one point of clarification. Top page 13, we talked about, and I hate to rub salt in the wounds here, Councillor Mason, but we talked about the sheriff's position on A and G, and then at the bottom in the resolves bit at the end, there's not any sort of reference to that I can sort of clearly see. And I wondered, because obviously that was a discussion we had, was just for my own clarification, was that because it was written in the first place and therefore it didn't need changing, or was it the other way around? Janie, you might be able to clarify that one, because I just think it's something worth noting.
Fine, I will hand over to Janie. There are some additional comments, but Janie, is there anything you want to add, or do you want me to make comment on this? No, you're on mute.
I didn't think it was. Is it about the bit about, Chair, about the membership element, or
yes,
is
the
it
membership
about
of A&G and as it relates to the sheriff's participation?
Yeah, we've made more inquiries around the appointment of the sheriff and the membership, and the sheriff does not have to be a City of York councillor, and so therefore it would be inappropriate to include the sheriff as being excluded from membership of the City of York, because the sheriff is not always a City of York councillor. So we've done some further research. Because the Sheriff of York is a personal appointment of the Lord Mayor, the Lord Mayor has the discretion to choose any citizen to be the sheriff. So it was felt it was a little bit too discriminatory to include it, because it's not always a City of York councillor.
Councillor Lomas.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. That point was made during the meeting, and the discussion that we had was, nevertheless, if the sheriff was a councillor, then it would be inappropriate for them to be a member of Audit and Governance, because of the way that might be perceived. And we talked quite a bit about the perception that you know, the public in general have about the civic party, and the great you know, the weight of the esteem which is placed upon the civic party. So I'm curious as to why that decision, which was made by the committee, I think we even voted on it, has been sort of overturned without referring it back to us to discuss. I totally accept the point you've just made, Janie, that it might not always be a City of York councillor, but it might be a City of York councillor. So that was the point that we discussed, and we did discuss that in the meeting. So unless there's some separate legal advice that gives a different perspective on it, I think we would want to stick with our decision, because we had considered the point in the meeting that the sheriff might not be a councillor, but I think our point was, when the sheriff was a councillor, this would apply.
Okay, so we just need to amend the wording slightly to caveat.
Councillor Webb. Sorry, I'll go, just before I go back to you, Janie, I've just got Councillor Webb.
Yeah, actually, I think Councillor Lomas has said everything that I wanted to.
All right. Okay. Janie.
So we just need to alter the wording slightly, just to caveat it, that it's when the sheriff is a City of York councillor. So just to put some clarity around it, because currently it doesn't distinguish whether the sheriff is a councillor or not. So we just need to add the additional wording that it's in the circumstances where the Sheriff of York is a City of York councillor, that provision will apply. So I just need to amend the wording because, you know, since discovered the sheriff does not have to be a City of York councillor.
Councillor Lomas.
Yeah, I don't think that discovery is something that has happened since the audit and governance last audit and governance meeting, Janie. We discussed that in the meeting, and this was about I believe it was about the terms of reference for audit and governance. It wasn't about anything that would confer on the sheriff any powers beyond their remit. This was just in the terms of reference for audit and governance, the note that the sheriff should not be. I think it was Lord Mayor and Sheriff, because it already says that the Lord Mayor shouldn't be on audit and governance, and I think it was to add and Sheriff. So I don't think that causes a problem anywhere. I'm just curious as to why we've ended up in a position where it's changed, and I absolutely want to be clear that we were aware at the last meeting that the sheriff might not always be a councillor, because indeed we were talking about former sheriffs who were not councillors.
Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think the only thing I'd add to that is I think I'm quite concerned that a decision that was made and is minuted, and I mean, it says quite clearly Councillor Mason didn't vote because he declared an interest. There was a decision in 5-1, and then that decision has been ignored essentially, and then it's only just because I was looking at it then and I'd noticed it that we've even mentioned it, and it just seems like, how would that happened?
There was.
Chair, it's quite easy. We can just add a commentary around Article 9, because actually the commentaries all relate to Article 5, because the debate around the sheriff was primarily around Article 5, and Robert could just offer some clarity as the author of the minutes, but we just need to be clear that in the resolutions, if that's to note, the vote was relating to Article 9, which is the terms of reference of the audit committee. So
Robert.
Yeah, I can add it to the result. The only reason it wasn't in there was because the vote that we took actually didn't change Janie's wording in the Constitution, because it was a vote to keep in what was already in there, and the resolved were covering changes to the Constitution.
See.
Apologies if it should have been in the resolved. I only covered in the resolved, like I said, the bits that we actually amended from the document that was already on and proposed.
We haven't actually amended Article 9 at all. I just need to add some caveat wording. It's where the instance is that the sheriff is a city councillor.
Councillor Lomas.
Yeah, sorry, I think thank you, Robert, for helping us out. If you look at the bottom of page 12 and the top of page 13, that does detail the vote and exactly what we voted on. So that contains that detail. I just think it's not separated out into the resolved elements. So I'm still not clear, Janie, what caveats need to be in place, because the wording is the membership of
wording.
The membership of the Audit and Governance Committee will not include in its membership any member of the executive or the Lord Mayor or the Sheriff.
Yeah, and I just need after the sheriff just to include in where the sheriff is a City of York councillor, because or else it'd be like a co-opted position. So I just need to clarify.
No,
that it's the
but Janie, we're not saying that they should be. We're saying they shouldn't be. So
fine. I won't do. It's fine.
Yeah,
it's not a
but
problem.
just correct me if I'm wrong. The committee voted 5-1 in favour against maintaining. Didn't we vote 5-1 in favour of maintaining the wording as it was in, rather than against the wording?
I think there
In
should be
favour
a.
of maintaining the wording.
I think
Yeah,
there should
it
be a
was-
comma probably to add a bit more clarification, because it's voted 5 in favour and 1 against.
Yeah.
Comma. In
Yes.
maintaining.
Yes.
Something like that would probably good. But yes, it was to 5 in 5. 5
Yeah.
voted for maintaining the wording.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
maintaining.
Okay, I'm going to move on, if that's okay. So we move on to the substantive agenda items, and I'm proposing that we move the agenda around to have agenda item 5, which is the report on the KCRs, first. So in order to allow Sarah and Jamila to leave the meeting when we're then discussing the public participation. I am so sorry. You see, I got so caught up on the minutes, I've forgotten agenda item 3, which is public participation. We have one speaker who could have been waiting for a very, very long time. Mr. Mendes, are you with us, joining us via Zoom?
I am, Michael. Your munchkins have now allowed me to be unmuted. So nice to see you, even if
I
you
don't think
can't
they are
see
munchkins,
me.
but they are very hard-working members of staff.
I'd scare the horses if you saw me, so I'm not allowed to have my video on, apparently.
But yes, you have 3 minutes to address us on items within the agenda or within the remit of this committee. I'm not absolutely certain.
Both on the agenda, Michael. Well, sort of, anyway.
Yeah,
right. So let me start with the important bit, and I'm pleased that you brought KCL 11 to the front. I'll pick up on the Constitution after the bake-off semi-final is finished, when I'm sure you're still talking. So on KCL 11, I read the generally very positive report with interest, but I would appreciate it if you would consider the approach to contract management within adult and social care and how it contrasts with the overall CYC rules on contract management that we've discussed in previous A&G meetings, and which are detailed on page 487 and following in the new Constitution. But for myself, I applaud the much more collaborative policy described in KCL 11 report. But I would like better to understand how the balance between value for money and level playing fields on the one hand and long-term collaborative partnerships on the other is maintained. Debbie will understand the background to this conversation. So on the matter of independent members, and specifically Article 9 of the proposed Constitution. Chair, as you know, I prepared this a few days ago, and I've this afternoon received a response from the monitoring officer, which answers the question about legality while I was on A&G, but doesn't address the issue of future membership, either in York or across England. So with your indulgence, I'll speak to my original script, which will take most of my 3 minutes, and then comment briefly on the monitoring officer's reply. I'll try and talk fast. So here goes. Following the telecast of the October meeting, I did some very basic research into independent members of audit and governance committees across England and circulated my findings to you all, along with questions to the monitoring officer. These findings seem at odds with the assertions made by the monitoring officer at the meeting. When I wrote this, I'd had no acknowledgement of my mails, apart from one, Councillor Mason, thank you, and specifically nothing from the monitoring officer. The partial response turned up today. So, please accept my apologies for the tone of this diatribe, but you may not appreciate how frustrating it is to be completely ignored, as if heaven forfend citizens of York are not important. At the end of my whinge, but I'm left now with a direct appeal to you as elected members to use your authority to insist that the relatively minor issue of independent members on audit and governance is addressed, rather than being consigned to a seldom listened to webcast and deleted email. The minutes of the last meeting report the discussion, but there's no conclusion about the way forward, and Article 9 is not on the table today. So I don't believe that the article will be changed unless you do something. So if you
30
do think it's
seconds.
important to have independent members on ANG, as you professed, then you need to cut through the smoke and mirrors and insist before the constitution is voted through as a 700-page whole. You probably need to do that today. So, as I said, with your indulgence, Michael, on the monitoring officer's reply, the Redmond Review is again cited as a stumbling block to any progress here, as is the Local Government Act 1972. I've addressed the LGA Act in my previous mail. Having reread Redmond today, I'm clear that while he sees the advantage of having an independent with suitable sector-based accounting expertise, he nowhere suggests this should be at the exclusion of other independents. On the Audit Committee, see Local Government Act 1972, he says. So, and this specifically is on an Audit Committee compared.
I'm going to have to ask you to wind up. You're well over your 3 minutes.
I know I am. That's because I had a mail at 12:43 this morning.
No, I appreciate it. Yeah.
Okay. So I have one paragraph left.
Okay, that's fine.
The government response turns its face against primary legislation changes, but supports the general thrust of Redmond. They say they'll work with the LGA, the NAO, and SIPFA to progress it. So while not a legal expert, I can't believe that 2 non-voting independents of ANG can be in breach of any laws. Many other councils seem to have come to the same conclusion. If one of the independents is a qualified accountant or lawyer, or indeed anything else, then fine. But I suggest you should appoint the best, most committed candidates. I don't remember the single conversation when I was on ANG which required formal accounting qualifications. Indeed, we were always told not to worry, Mazars handle that. And I, for one, never doubted their expertise or commitment. Thank you, Michael, for the extra time. Cheers.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Thank you, Mr. Mendes. And you will recall, I'm sure, the conversation that we had on the last occasion in respect of independent members. And I think there was, if not a broad consensus, it may have been unanimous that independent members were a valuable part of the work of the Audit and Governance Committee. And whilst, you know, it may be that there is an item, for example, the accounts, that a non-financially qualified independent member may not be able to comment on, the governance matters that we cover certainly would benefit from the involvement of an independent member, and therefore I think the view of the committee was, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong from the members, is that we would like to see an independent member on audit and governance, and we'd like to see that incorporated into the constitution. Am I mistaken on that? I see we've lost Councillor Fisher for a moment, but without Councillor Fisher, is that the view of the meeting and the members of this committee? Yes. Councillor Wang, can you just give me an indication as to whether you're in agreement as well? I have spoken with Councillor Fisher about this on a previous occasion, and I know his views.
Tony's back if you want to.
Yeah. Independent. Oh,
nope, he's gone again.
Are you in favour? Yes. So we would like it adding, and I hope that meets the points that you were raising, Mr. Mendes. Which is a reflection of the last discussion that we had.
Yeah, my only comment then is.
Sorry, I don't think I can take comments from you. Sorry, it was more of a rhetorical. I hope.
Let me observe then. Members, not member, would be better because one person falls under the bus. Anyway, that's my lot. I know.
Yeah.
I'm surprised I haven't been chucked out yet. I probably will.
Thank you. So. We will now move on to agenda item 5, which is monitor 2, key corporate risks. And I'd like to introduce Sarah. If you can, Sarah, introduce yourself and Jamila and your roles and what you're going to be presenting to us this evening.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I'm Sarah Kirby. I'm the Principal Accountant in Corporate Finance, and I'm responsible for coordinating all the key corporate risks. So as you say, we've got the key corporate risk report here today, Monitor 2. And Jamila Hussain is my colleague that has contributed to this one this time, because we are looking in more detail at KCR 11 about external market conditions in relation to contracting. So if you like, I will just quickly present the report and then can open it up, and Jamila can introduce herself at that point. So the cover report, as you know, we just talked there about how we manage the risks. Annex A is a summary of all the 12 KCRs and further details on there about the risks, the implications and the controls. As I said, Annex B is going into more detail in relation to KCR 11. And Jamila can answer any questions on that. So there aren't any new risks since the last monitor. There's no changes to any of the scores. I'll just mention what the changes are. In Annex A, they are highlighted in bold when we've got anything new going on compared to the last monitor. So on KCR 2, we've just got a new risk there in relation to recognition of the actions that we need to complete to satisfy the public interest report. And the risk, of course, is that if they're not completed, there could be issues with signing off the accounts. I've also put in a new control on KCR 10 on the back of a discussion that we had at the last monitor about business continuity. So the specific discussion was in relation to, for example, the shortage that we'd had for HGV drivers. So as I said at the last meeting, those types of things are covered in the directorate risk registers, but I've just put a control on there to note that we've got the business continuity in place for those sorts of issues and redeploying staff in relation to that. And there's just a few changes on KCR 11 as well, which are just reflecting the new information that's come from Jamila. So that's my introduction. I'll just leave that open now for questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions before we go into detail on Annex B, which is Jamila's section 11, KCR 11? Are there any questions on Annex A or the cover report? Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Chair. On KCR 10, workforce capacity, the new bit at the end, the around the business continuity planning around HGV drivers. I mean, HGV drivers is a good example, but I was wondering if you could sort of suggest how other situations, what kind of other situations are we talking about, and how would we, you know, how are we doing that business continuity plan? What does that involve to then come up with those situations?
Well, each directorate has their own plan, business, even, you know, it's sort of, there's different levels. So a specific service will have their own business continuity plan for their very specific service issues. And then there's kind of like more of an overarching one for each directorate. So I don't know any more details about that, but I can find out about exactly how that works, because I can talk to the specific officer that coordinates all of that. I don't think there's anyone else here in the meeting that might know any more information at that point, but I can find out about that. But it's kind of is very managed from a sort of bottom up sort of approach, where you know, each service is looking at their own issues and managed by the directorate. So it wouldn't necessarily kind of come to my attention as the person that's coordinating the key corporate risks. It's just I had that conversation with directors to ensure that that was happening really at that level. So I can go out and find some more information about that if you like.
Thank you. I've got one for that I think Debbie can answer. which is on KCR 1, the financial pressures. Debbie, you mentioned an economic downturn will affect the council's main sources of funding, reducing business rates income if premises are vacant and reducing council tax income if more individuals require support due to unemployment. My question specifically around business rates, and I have discussed this with you on a separate occasion. If there is a marked change in business rates, as has been raised in the spending review, the autumn spending review, how is the council's income going to be impacted by that?
Well, at this stage, we don't know that because we don't know what they would be proposing. So if the government, I mean, Sarah can probably come in on this because she'll know just as much, if not more, about business rates. But if the government decide to change anything with regard to business rates retention, then there will have to be some compensation mechanism as part of the overall collection fund. I don't know whether you can add to that, Sarah.
Yeah, I mean, that's right, really. As you say, like if government decide to make any changes, we are generally compensated for that. So I won't go into details, but that it's more about the issue that we're highlighting here is more about sort of collection rates and that type of thing. So that can have an impact on the collection fund, which then eventually filters through to the general fund budget. Yeah,
actually, I think our collection rates have held up really well, haven't they, throughout the pandemic?
Yeah.
So we're not at this stage overly concerned about collection rates, but it is a potential risk.
Yeah, which is why it's in there.
Yeah, and it's more perhaps for longer term as well. Again, without going into sort of technical details, but at some point in the future, there will be a business rates baseline reset, and that could have an effect on the amount of funding that we receive from government. So that's something just for perhaps a couple of years in the future. It's been happening for years and kept being postponed. So that could have a significant impact on us as well.
But that would come to us for an amendment to the KCR. So it would be discussed by the corporate directors and the executive members, but then it will be incorporated if there were to be any changes into the KCR. Is that correct?
And it would be an impact on the budget setting sort of process. Yeah.
Then there was one other correction that in respect to the local plan, which is KCR 8, it seems a little bit out of date because we're now been notified of a new set of examinations. So the final outstanding evidence was submitted to inspectors on the 30th of April 2021. My understanding is that additional information was submitted to the inspectorate at the end of August, and that we've got new examinations starting on the 22nd of February. Would that get amended?
It would. I mean, it's probably to do with the fact that I did sort of go to CMT with this quite a few weeks ago, so that's probably why
that notification came through.
Yeah, and we thought we were coming to the previous A&G as well. So so sorry about that, but I'll make sure that's reflected in the next version.
Thank you, that's great. So if we hand over now to Jamila, can you talk to us in a bit more detail about KCR 11?
Yeah, no problem. And for those who don't know me, my name's Jamila Hussain. I am the Director of Prevention and Commissioning for the Council. So I am going to assume that people have read the reports. I'm not going to go any too in depth, but just to give you some key highlights, I think the risks that we've highlighted in the report remain, and not just a York risk, but it's a national risk, especially around recruitment and retention of staff within the external market. The increase in costs to external providers and the increases in national living wage, and also the changes that have occurred following COVID-19 in terms of staff moving on and being able to support staff in lots of different ways across the care home market, both care homes and care at home. And the implications are clear to see. And a majority of our providers are talking about financial implications and the increased cost of providing support, as well as cost around supporting recruitment. So we know that we have risks around provider failure, and also risk around care not being provided if that occurs. So some key risks and implications there that we are fully aware of and supporting the market on. But I think in the report we've sort of highlighted some key controls that we have. So we've asked all our care providers, as part of our duties under the Care Act, around business continuity, also around those providers that feel that they might be becoming at risk because of financial constraints, so we can actually proactively manage our market. We haven't had, we've only had 2 market contract failures at this moment in time, which is much which is ahead of some of our other regional and national partners. We have been working with providers, as I said, to proactively manage that. And we've managed the move from one contract to another quite smoothly, and it's not affected any of our service users. So some key areas of progress, really, we've really stepped up some of our contract management around our care homes and care at home providers. Equally, we've embedded some early intervention and prevention approaches, and working across following COVID-19, we've worked across regional partners as well as local partners to stabilise the market, to make sure that we have agreed costs of care, looking at those costs of care if they support the actual cost of delivery, as well as focusing on the quality of care people receive. And now we've increased our contract and quality quality oversight on particular providers who have sent in business continuity plans that require further support from the council. We've also moved into increasing working together around prevention and early intervention, and this helps us stabilise some of the care market, as not everybody requires care, but we might require support earlier on in their journey. And as part of that, we have been working with our public health colleagues as well as our health colleagues in looking at what does it mean to support people earlier on in their communities, and stabilising some of the market in that way, and not bringing people into care prematurely. Alongside some of this work and the financial stability, we have been supporting our providers on infection prevention control. I know people are aware around COVID-19 and the increased support around care homes, and an infection control fund was set up, including the rapid testing. That's still going on through this year. We've had additional monies nationally, which we have passported over to care homes to ensure that they have the appropriate PPE and appropriate infection prevention control measures in place to support individuals and individuals in their care and their staff as well. Moving down the report, because I'm not going to go in detail to it, we're looking at commissioning a new care at home offer. This is where I've talked about a single pathway from early intervention all the way to higher end care. We're looking at providing this with our CCG colleagues to ensure that we have the right care in place at the right time, and it's the care that is commissioned in the most appropriate way. So that's actually ongoing at the moment to support the market, and for the market to provide them with some updates on where, as a council, we are going in the future. We are at the moment just completing what's called a market position statement. This market position statement that makes it clear to providers around the direction of adult social care and the direction commissioners are looking to take as we move forward. As we know, we want to reduce the reliance on 24-hour residential care and support more people at home, support individuals with learning disabilities and autism closer to their home and the communities, and support them into education and employment. And these are the things that the market position statement will highlight for providers to consider as they move through their own business plans going through the future, and notwithstanding the support for children and young people within the market position statement. We are very mindful of provider failure as we go through this winter, because it's still a big concern for us. Like I have mentioned, we had 2 providers that have failed, but we have very quickly ensured that care has been delivered and there has been no gaps in care. But we are working with both our internal service, our personal support service, as well as our external care providers. We now have a better insight into each provider we are contracted with and where they are within their financial structure as well as their staffing structures. Further to this, we've done additional work with our regional colleagues on a workforce plan, because I think this is not just a York issue, it's an issue across the region. And how do we support the retention and recruitment of staff, both in social care and in our external markets? And there's a clear workforce plan in place that we're looking to implement across the region, working with North Yorkshire and East Riding. So that's a update on the report, and clearly shows the work that we've done, the care home support that we're giving, and also the work that's still ongoing around ensuring we do not have any further provider failures. We haven't had any at the moment, and I'm not anticipating any providers coming back to the council at this moment in regards of either staffing issues or financial issues at the moment, because we have done our due diligence.
Thank you. Before I go to members, can I just ask a question? In respect of staff retention, are you not picking up a number of staff being forced to leave through being unvaccinated? And what plans do you have in place if those care homes become subsequently unviable?
Yeah, so we've monitored this quite closely with our public health colleagues. So I think we've only got 1% of the care home workforce that are yet to have their vaccination. So it's been quite stable. We've been quite lucky in York, where we haven't had the same resistance as in other areas of the workforce not being vaccinated. Some people are on their boosters as we speak. The 1% are across the care home, so don't put too much pressure around care home delivery. But we will carry on monitoring it and looking at ensuring that care home staff have the boosters. So when I'm talking about boosters, that's a positive thing, because that shows that most of our care staff within care homes and within domiciliary care have been double vaccinated.
Thank you. Colleagues, are there any questions for Jamila in respect of KCR 11? No, thank you. It was Councillor Webb.
Sorry, I hope this will be relatively brief. Haxby Hall, obviously that recently has moved away from the council, and there's obvious moves there to sort of change working conditions. And I know we're talking about recruitment and retention. Have you got any concerns there, or how are we working with that facility?
Yeah, we are working very closely with Haxby Hall. I think in one aspect, the provider is looking to enhance Haxby Hall and make it a home that can be used as a community asset as well as a residential setting. They're going through the consultation at the moment, Councillor Webb, and we are working really closely with them. I think part of the issues the provider is having is wanting to retain staff and keeping the staff they have, but changing some of the conditions and the contract conditions that they have. So we are working through with them. I don't want to say too much on that at the moment, because it's going through the consultation, and following the consultation report we can give further updates. But the provider is looking to try to retain as many of the staff as it can whilst it goes through the changes. But I think when we've spoken to the provider, absolutely committed on supporting the workforce locally, and committing to look at how we can enhance sort of our community assets as well across Haxby Hall and the other provisions they have.
So can I just ask a supplementary? So in respect of a business risk, is there a significant business risk of Haxby Hall not being able to deliver the services that it was envisaged that they would deliver when it was transferred into their ownership?
Not at the moment. They have gone through this consultation because they felt it was that proactive planning, Chair, about they know they were going to go into some financial risk. Obviously, COVID has added to that, has added to some of the building costs, because they're updating Haxby Hall, so it will be a place that people will be really proud to live in, and that's caused some pressures on their budgets. Hence why they're looking at doing some of the consultation. But some of the consultation is also around aligning the staff across the rest of their provision as well, so making sure that everybody's on a singular contract. At this moment, we've been assured by the provider that there is no risk of them not being able to deliver a service, and that service failing. So there's no risk at this moment in time. But particularly with Haxby Hall, we're talking about contract management. We are managing them every month, just to make sure that there's a smooth transition and that services are being provided at good quality whilst they go through the consultation.
Thank you. Thank you. If there aren't any other questions, I'd like to say thank you to both Sarah and Jamila. It's the first time we've seen you before this committee, and you're very welcome. And thank you very much for your report, and we will see you again, I suspect, Sarah, next month. Well, when I say next month, I mean in a fortnight. So yes.
No, you won't see me in a fortnight.
Well, you're not going to be
You'll
there.
see me soon. No.
Yes, good for you. So right, well, thank you very much, and we'll see you when we see you.
Thank you.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So thank you for that, colleagues. We will now move to agenda item 4, which is the substantive item, or the item that's likely to take the most amount of time this evening, which is the review of the Council's constitution. And this report has been prepared by Janie, so I will introduce her. I suspect everybody who's ever watched one of these webcasts knows who Janie is, but just in case they don't, would you just introduce yourself, Janie, and your role in this? I was going to say in this performance, but in respect to the Constitution.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Janie Berry. I'm the Council's Director of Governance and Monitoring Officer. And I'm the officer with responsibility for the Constitution and support the Audit Committee in their role as custodian of the member custodian of the Constitution.
Great, thank you.
So I'll continue.
Yes, would you like to introduce the report and the work that we're now going to be taking on over the next however many hours?
Well, I'm hoping it's not going to be like many hours, though I've noted just how many sections we are actually hoping to get through this evening. So if I may start at page 19 of the agenda. On the last occasion you indicated, Chair, the articles and the appendices that you'd asked the committee to consider in readiness for this evening. So starting off if this is acceptable. I'm just kind of working off the agenda really, but it's Article 14, which is the gambling license, the council's licensing functions. So this has been updated, and it has been consulted on with officers to ensure that it is currently fit for purpose and compliant with the legislation. I have, as indicated in the report, removed some functions which are actually governance functions, and because we discussed Article 9 on the last occasion, you may recall some of those. So functions relating to elections, for example, they're not regulatory functions, they are governance functions. So we have removed those and put them under your remit. So that is the kind of perhaps the major change that has occurred. So I'm quite happy to take. I'm not quite sure, Chair, what you wish, whether you just wish me to talk until I'm interrupted.
I think it might be easiest if we go through them one at a time, and then when we move to the next article, you can say what the context for that is if, well, whether it's all right or not, that's how I think we ought to do it.
Oh, okay.
So colleagues, Janie will make notes as we're going along, though she may have to refer to the webcast for any suggested amendments to these articles and appendices as we go along. So, Article 14, the council's licensing functions. Were there anything that colleagues felt needed to be amended, added to, changed, or is it satisfactory in its composition as we see it? Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Chair. Just a point of clarification. Do we need to, it might be somewhere else in this giant document, but do we need to clarify the membership of the licensing committees? Not sitting on licensing myself. Do we need to sort of say who could be on it? Is it proportional? You know, I don't think it is, but I'm not sure. Do we need to clarify that here?
We can, if you wish. There is, in law, there is a maximum number of people that can be appointed to the main licensing committee. It is politically proportionate, so it is done by annual council on the allocation of seats, but there are no restrictions as to. I know we've had a debate about executive members on planning, for example. It's a bit similar. Executive members can sit on, actually can't sit on licensing. So we can be more explicit if you wish.
Any views?
Personally, as I raised it, I feel like making it clear whenever we're talking about a committee, making its membership clear would seem to make sense for me, because quite frankly, it's one of the things that keeps coming up in arguments, isn't it? And if it's within the right part, personally, I feel it makes sense.
Are there any dissenting views to that? No, I don't have an issue. I don't have an issue with adding that. If that could be incorporated, then Janie, that would be great. I didn't have anything on 14, so yeah, with that slight amendment, we accept 14 as written. 15A, the Corporate Appeals Committee. Janie.
Yeah, so the council already has a Corporate Appeals Committee, and one of the things that we do have to look at actually is a panel of 3 members. So we do run out of members, and also there is an issue around gender balance on occasions as well that has been expressed to us, because it's limited to 3 members. So there have been occasions currently where there are 3 males who are members of the Corporate Appeals Panel, and we have received some concerns from trade unions and members of staff and head of HR as well about looking at that. Now at 15B, apologies if the numbering changes because I'm working off a slightly older version, but at 15B, we've also put issues around investigating and disciplinary committee as well. And so this section 15 has been amended to sit alongside, if you recall, we started discussing Appendix 12 on the last occasion, which is the officer employment procedure rules, and the JNC handbook for chief officers and the chief executive. So we've had to introduce the investigatory and disciplinary committee and appeals committee. So this is currently subject to a discussion. We do have to look at a membership of 3. It is difficult being gender balanced, but also we don't want to swamp a committee with many members, because it can be intimidating for a member of staff when their appeal is being considered and they have to attend. So there are some concerns about the numbers involved in this one.
So are you on 15B or 15A now?
I'm on 15A at the moment.
Oh, you're still on 15A.
Appeals committee is number 3, is 3 panel members. So I'm seeking views of Audit and Governance Committee about that, because it is a concern around balancing the gender balance of it, but also I don't want too many members on the committee, because that would be equally intimidating for a member of staff.
Councillor Lomas.
Yeah, I think it's a really tricky one, isn't it? I completely agree, Janie, about you wouldn't want to create a panel that had a huge membership and that could be intimidating. With 3, very difficult to just say it should be gender balanced. But I think you could include wording to the effect of at least 1 woman or minority gender, and that would give you some element of balance, as balanced as you can be with an odd number. It just allows for some semblance of balance. But I'm actually curious to know, kind of, you know, do we frequently have the issue of having all male panels and committee meetings?
Yes,
so then
do.
I think it would be really important to say, in any and every incidence where we have any kind of panel or group or anything like that, to have you know, at least with a small number and an odd number, at least 1 woman or minority gender, and then for larger numbers and even numbers, then, you know, you should always seek gender balance, even if you can't achieve it exactly. Then making sure it's not a manel is a good start, isn't it?
Yeah, I've been on 3. I've been on 3 panels, Katie, Councillor Lomas, and they've all been all male. And you know, I do feel that is a significant issue. Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Chair. I was wondering if one thing we could look at is nominated substitutes. If I assume that each party essentially nominates, each political party, or I don't know how that quite works, nominates a person and then nominates a substitute. If within a political group or within the group that was making the decision, they had to say 1 person was male, 1 person was female, then I suppose that might then make it easier down the line to help. If you then suddenly had to convene a panel of 3, that might be a way around that issue, just as a thought.
Councillor Fisher.
I totally agree that no panel should be of a single gender. I think the wording may be difficult, because I'm not sure if there are any councillors who identify as non-binary. I'm not certain of that. But the key point is it should be at least 1 male and at least 1 female. You know, should be on each panel. And we don't have a single gender panel. I think that's just very important.
Yeah, I think that's. I think saying that there should be no single gender panels. Councillor Lomas.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Fisher. That's why I specifically included minority genders, because that would cover anyone who was non-binary or identified with an alternative minority gender that's not covered, and we should really try to refer to people as if they're adult humans as men and women rather than males and females, because saying males and females is really dehumanizing. So I think I would err on the side of men and women if we're talking about specific people, but to say the panel should contain at least one woman or person of minority gender will cover all of those things.
Is that your preferred wording then, Councillor Lomas?
I would, that's my suggestion.
Have you caught that, Jenny?
Can I just make a comment, Chair, just on the substitute issue raised by Councillor Webb?
Yeah.
So there's currently 2 substitutes who are nominated for this. Both of them, to be reassuring, are women. However, there does tend to be occasions where they're not free. So I think perhaps a little bit like the example that you've just given around and the decisions that you made around substitutes for planning, perhaps we can widen the pool of substitutes for this committee.
That's what I was going to
that
suggest.
Would help, because it is so restricted that actually it does cause difficulties. And if the 2 substitutes are not available, it also means that there's an unnecessary adjournment, sometimes for a lengthy period or longer than is necessary for everybody. And these are really anxious issues which are being dealt with by a corporate appeals committee. So if
I was going to make that suggestion that there's more flexibility around the use of substitutes.
Yeah. So if the committee's happy, I'm happy to work with yourself outside of this meeting just to look at the wording around substitutes for this, because I know that we're not touching the substitutes issue this evening because we've raised that elsewhere when we address the planning issue. But I do think one of the resolutions might just be to broaden the extent of the use of substitutes, because it is just limited to 2 people at the minute, which does make it difficult.
I think that would be sensible, and I'm happy with the wording that Councillor Lomas has suggested. Is there anybody that would offer an alternative form of wording or any dissenting voices? No. Councillor Lomas, if Janie hasn't quite caught all of that, would you be happy just to confirm it with her? But no, I think that's excellent. Thank you. Was there anything that you wanted to add on 15B, Janie, before we?
I just wanted
some corrections there.
So 15B is new. So 15B has not previously featured in the council's constitution, because the council's constitution, as I said on the last occasion when we looked at Appendix 12, Officer Employment Procedurals, has not really referenced heavily the JNC handbook for chief officers and the chief executive. And part of the disciplinary procedures for chief officers and the statutory chief officers and the chief executive is the convening of an investigating and disciplinary committee and a chief officer appeals committee. So the arrangements for an IDC, if I may call it that, are I've replicated those and created this appendix. And this would be a virtual committee that would come together should the need arise. And obviously, I've put in there the specific JNC requirements around membership, which is no fewer than 5 elected members. One must be an executive member, etc. So it is exactly as it's listed in the paperwork. But this was missing from the existing constitution, but this sits with the amended Appendix 12, which is, I'm sure it's Appendix 12, which is the Officer Employment Procedure Rules.
Yeah. And
this is guidance taken directly from the JNC handbook.
So just on that, 1.1 E, you state to include at least one member of the executive member. I think
as a typograph, I've just noticed that. That's me typing.
You can lose one of the members.
Yes. Yeah. I'll delete the last reference of it.
Yes, yes. 2.1 A. Do you think you should define the chief executive and the chief officers? I know we've talked about this before. whether it's in a summary or is it referred to somewhere else. The reason I bring it up is because, as you've quite rightly said, if people are actually interested in one section, as we've now adopted this constitution, they will go to that section and its associated appendix. They won't necessarily read the whole constitution to try to find what a reference to a chief executive is, or what an a chief officer. So I just wonder whether these definitions, where we're making reference to them, ought to be defined each time.
So you may
disagree with you by all means.
Sorry, I haven't yet written the introduction, because that's the last thing that I was writing.
Yeah.
So you may recall that we're putting some of the definitions right at the beginning in the introduction. There's also definitions listed throughout the Constitution. So Appendix 12 has got some definitions in, Appendix 1 has got some definitions in, and then some of the articles which we'll come across later around officers have definitions in about categorization of who certain statutory officers are, and we'll come on to that. But I think my intention is at the beginning to put an introduction in, and I know that some members of this committee are helping me craft that introduction as well, and there'll be some definitions as part of that. So, but that's the last thing that I can write, really.
Could we just put in brackets then, see introduction for definition or something like that, so that people know where they can find it. Councillor Fisher.
A small point, maybe I'm missing something. A and B seem to say exactly the thing about non-statutory chief officers as C says about non-chief officers. The first one is appeals short of dismissal, one is against dismissal, and then in C you've got exactly the same thing for non-chief officers against both. Could A and B not be redrafted as one clause just to clarify it and make it shorter? Or is there a reason why non-statutory chief officers have a slightly different process?
It's a different process. There's a different process for statutory chief officers than there is to chief officers. So the statutory chief officers this relates to is the monitoring officer, the section 151, and the head of paid service. Other chief officers are non-statutory chief officers, and there's two different sorts of actions here. So A is action short of dismissal, B is against dismissal. So subtle differences.
Okay, fine.
So does this panel have, just on that point, does it have any role in respect of dismissal? You make reference to actions short of dismissal.
The IDC?
Yeah. Does it have any role in respect of recommending a dismissal?
Yes, it does.
Well, should it? So it says A, to hear appeals against action taken short of dismissal, so what role does the IDC have in
Are you on to section 15A or 15B?
I'm in 15B now.
Which section? Sorry, because
3.2.
Oh, right, because I was still in the first page at 2.1.
Oh,
sorry. Yeah, so that is the chief, but that's when it sits as a chief officer appeals committee.
Yeah, so it's when it's sitting as an appeals committee, but not, so it's not an investigation that can recommend a dismissal, for example.
Gosh, I'd have to look at Appendix 12 now, and I'm sorry, I haven't read Appendix 12 already for this evening.
Fine.
So I can, if I can come back to you on that.
I think we will be. Are we covering Appendix 12? We may well be.
No.
No. Oh, right.
We're not. Because we did that on the last occasion with members to give me some feedback following their consideration.
Right. Okie dokie. Are there any others? And we're going to then have a break after that. One of colleagues has asked for a break. Are there any other suggestions for Appendix Article 15A or B? No. In which case, we will take a short break now, and then we will move to Article 20. How long do you, I was just going to say, how long do we want? 5 minutes, Tony? 10 minutes?
5 minutes should do it. Thank you. Just let me get a drink and a sweet.
Yeah, no, that's
Let's
absolutely
go for
fine.
7 minutes takes us till 10 to.
Yeah.
Till 10 to, yeah. Tony, you must tell us when you're needing some sugar.
It's okay. Yeah, that's why I did it. That's why
Yeah.
I put it in.
No, that's absolutely
I
fine.
don't want to get in a position where I have a crash.
No, absolutely.
That's all. Sorry about earlier, by the way. My son didn't know I was in a meeting and was ringing the doorbell to try and get me to go outside, so it could scare me witless.
Oh, I see. Right.
That's why I went down. There was nobody there, and then
Hello and welcome back, everybody. Part 2 of tonight's audit and governance meeting, and just for the benefit of the meeting and those watching, Councillor Mason has now formally left the meeting for an official function, and we thank him for his attendance. So we now move to Article 20, which is York's commitment to corporate parenting. Jamie.
Thank you, Chair. So, the Council's commitment to corporate parenting is not previously featured in the Council's constitution, though information has been available on the Council's website. I've worked closely with the Corporate Parenting Board, with the previous Corporate Director of People, who is the joint DCS and DAS, and with the current interim DCS. And this is an approved document, which has been approved by Corporate Parenting Board and by our previous DCS and the current interim DCS. It's here for noting by the committee.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Colleagues, Councillor Webb.
Yeah, you thought I might have something to say on this one. I suppose my first point would be 4.1a. Provide leadership across the city to create a more effective and efficient health and well-being for children and young people in care and care leavers. I wonder if you could just explain a little bit about what that actually means. And then, I mean, I noticed further on in the report, given the serious nature of the fact that this body essentially sort of oversees children's services, there doesn't seem to be any, firstly, there's no opposition members involved whatsoever in the membership. And I'm just wondering how scrutiny of children's services would work as a result. Does it mean that further scrutiny would fall on the Children Education and Communities Committee as a result? And I think that that's something that we really do need to clarify. And also, I do support and I like the idea of children in care and care leavers actually being sort of part of the board. But it, you know, there are items that will come to that could be quite sensitive, and I wonder how that is to be. So it's some really points of clarification, but in particular, the lack of opposition in order to show scrutiny. You know, it's the lack of scrutiny that's a concern.
Okay. So a couple of things. The purpose of Corporate Parenting Board is primarily for young people to have their say and tell the council their experiences of what it's like to be parented by the council, and it's effectively holding the council to account. So it's the young people holding the council to account. It is not. It is supposed to be a joint committee, and it's supposed to hear expressly the voices of young people. That's its primary purpose. In respect of the definition that you mentioned, the reference you mentioned at 4.1a, this is about making sure that on behalf of young people, the City of York Council does prioritise the health and wellbeing needs of our children and young people who are in our care and who are also leaving our care as well. So making sure that they have the best opportunity and the best chances possible, just as if your children do as a natural parent. So it is more looking at the parenting. Now, there is a dual role because it works alongside the scrutiny committee. It doesn't replace the scrutiny committee, but it works alongside, and this is the young people's voice that works alongside the politicians on the scrutiny committee and the other co-opted persons on the scrutiny committee. So it has a very defined place. In terms of the membership, the political membership, this has been discussed quite at length by the current members of the Corporate Parenting Board, and they've approved the membership, the makeup of it as detailed at 5.3. I would just have to come back to you outside of this meeting about who the members are who are on Show Me I Matter and Still Matter, because I just don't have that list with me at the moment. But this change in membership has been approved by that board, recognising that this board is not about politics or about opposition. It's about every elected member being treated as a corporate parent in equal capacity, and obviously holding the 2 executive members to account because they are the lead members for delivering the services. I will have to come back to you about the membership of those. But in terms of young people being part of the board, it is actually a positive to have young people actually on the board. So currently, we really struggle to have young people represented on the corporate parenting board for a number of reasons. It has been until recently live streamed as a formal meeting. Many young people are unwilling to be put in a position where they are in a public filmed meeting. And also they need a forum as well where they can privately express their concerns about being parented and their experiences, so that lessons can be learned to prevent sort of any sort of personal unpleasantries that they may have experienced in their care life from being repeated. So the current members of the corporate parenting board are extremely mindful that if you were 13 or 14 and you wanted to discuss something private, you would not necessarily do that in the public domain with everybody listening, when it actually matters to your own direct personal well-being. So this board is now taken completely offline. It meets in private to protect the interests of young people and ensuring that they have a strong voice. Another issue about the involvement of young people is that the current members of the corporate parenting board have been really keen to have like a shared ownership of this committee with young people. So there's now provision in here that if the young person appointed as the co-chair is so minded, he or she will support the appointed chair of corporate parenting to present an annual report to full council, so that all 47 councillors can hear the voice directly of our young people. So there's a much greater participation. When we're inspected as part of ILACs by Ofsted, we are actually inspected on our engagement and involvement with young people. So our current interim DCS is of the view that this is a positive step forward. Some of these principles as well. There is a corporate parenting board at Lancashire County Council, which is held out as a beacon of good practice. And we have taken on board the services, the terms of reference that are currently delivered by Lancashire, because that is held as a beacon of good practice of a corporate parenting board or committee.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Webb.
Yeah, thank you, Janie. So where and how do we reference the scrutiny? Because I welcome the idea this is a, as you've put it, a non-political committee, but it has, you know, monitoring of our children's services is serious. And so I think that we need to be really clear about how that monitoring happens. And I'm fine if it's not going to happen in this committee, but we need to reference where it happens. So for example, you know, with parts J, consider the outcomes of regular visit and inspection report provision for children in care. Not having the ability to scrutinise that is going to be really tricky. And the situation I envisage is someone wanting to scrutinise that and it being told to members, oh, well, it's gone through corporate parenting. But if corporate parenting is not the political body, and is it right that some of these things are in here, including oversee and monitor key performance indicators? I mean, I'd class that as scrutiny. You know, the final point, determine ways in which the role of corporate parenting can be improved. Again, that is scrutiny. And I just sort of, it's just really, I think that if you've got these things in, I think it's really important that we have the children providing scrutiny, but in you know, a reasonable democracy, surely there's room for having opposition in there as well.
Right. So I need to be really clear. This is not scrutiny. There is a role for scrutiny, and we've not looked at the terms of reference for scrutiny committees because that is currently being undertaken by scrutiny chairs, and we're awaiting their feedback, which I understand from the chair, Councillor Pavlovic, that will be provided to us on the 1st of December. And so I'm currently awaiting that, but we have already amended the terms of reference of the Children Education Scrutiny Committee to include scrutiny of looked after children and children's social care. So that is now included, and it previously was absent. The annual report from the corporate parenting does go to the Scrutiny Committee as well. So there is an opportunity to look at the work of corporate parenting through the scrutiny process. And the idea is that the corporate parenting panel and the scrutiny and children's scrutiny should work alongside each other. The performance figures, the actions that corporate parenting do are not political. These are about direct impacts on improving children's lives and improving our standards as being parents, because this is about the voice of foster carers, the voice of all of the professionals in the support network that help us care for our young people. And more importantly, it's about the voices of young people being heard, so that that feedback can go elsewhere amongst people's services and then feed into work of scrutiny to look at. So it should work alongside, but this is just a private meeting that allows children to have a very clear voice. Now, I've already referenced that I can't possibly right at this minute remember who are the elected members on the various panels, and I would have to go back to that, because this was approved in earlier this year by the Corporate Parenting Board, and they were the members, which is cross-party currently, were happy with the membership as it's currently detailed in here, and they have approved this as an acceptable document. So if we want to make any amendments, I would have to take it back to corporate parenting for them to consider, and obviously with our interim DCS as well.
Apologies for me considering, politics about making people's lives better, Jenny, but I'll leave that one there.
Politics should not feature in children's lives, and my professional background is children's and adult social care for over 20 years. So for me, it's about children's voices are absolutely paramount.
Can I just ask a question though about 7.1? This report to full council, is that new? Because
yes,
it's never happened before.
No, it is new. The problem is that all 47 councillors have never been previously given access to the views of young people via corporate parenting, and it's essential that all 47 councillors and all officers are corporate parents. And it was felt very strongly by the corporate parenting panel that children's views and concerns should be shared amongst all 47 councillors, and that is the best forum is full council, and therefore the annual report will go there, and it will be presented by the elected member, who is the chair of this panel, and co-chair, which would be a young person, so that all members can hear directly the voice of the young person.
And will that be webcast?
The annual report is yes, and obviously we'd need the consent of the young person who may be the co-chair of it. The option is that the co-chair can decline, so it will just be the elected member. But it's important about giving the co-chair, who is the young person, the option to participate if they do. And some care leavers, some young people do actually want that public platform as when they're a bit older, so they do. So it's about giving them the choice and the voice to do that if they wish. Now, the annual report is always done, but it currently just goes to children's scrutiny and doesn't go elsewhere. It doesn't get shared more broadly across all 47 councillors.
Okay, and just on 1.1, it mentions, and this is a minor point, young people who are unable to remain in the care of their parents. Should it say parents and guardians, or parents or guardians?
No, it's the legal definition. It is.
Oh, it's the legal definition.
At the minute, yes. This is kind of quite standard wording.
Is it right?
So yes, and it's been approved by social workers.
Okay, right. Are there any other contributions in respect of Article 20? If not, we'll move on. And the next one is Article 21.
So, Chair, this is in the current constitution and is simply a shift and drop. So there's been no amendments made to this whatsoever.
Okay. 2.2 and 2.3. Yes. So, what circumstances might the executive establish joint arrangements and delegate non-executive functions to another local authority? I mean, it seems like very dangerous territory, that.
It's actually more common than you would think. So the most common is around the adoption service.
Really?
So where you have an adoption service that is more on a regional footprint than on just a local council footprint, and that is to maximise the opportunity of obtaining placements and securing best futures for children. So one of the most common is creation of adoption agencies, and this is done by joint arrangements.
Right. So delegating executive functions to another local authority, or the executive of another local authority in certain circumstances. I just find it difficult when we have things as vague as certain circumstances. They don't really define anything. And therefore they can mean anything that you want them to be. Councillor Fisher.
You just asked the exact question I was going to ask. Under what circumstances would you delegate to another council's executive? I just find that very strange.
It's quite rare, but the option is there to do it. So I can't just think of something off the top of my head, but the executive functions are listed in legislation. So you would have to look at that. What can I think about?
I'm just thinking, you know, if there's a decision that one administration wants to abdicate or an executive wants to abdicate because it's potentially unpopular, they say, well, somebody else made that decision.
No, you don't. No, you don't do that. It's not like that. You can't just abdicate from your decision making. This is where two councils agree to deliver a service, and one takes the lead. So you pass the governance arrangements for the decision making of that particular function to another council. This is probably going to become more prevalent as devolution in North Yorkshire may.
So for example,
develop.
the waste collection.
Yeah, waste is one. Yeah, again, you deliver.
Authority.
Again, for economies of scale, you may deliver waste on a much larger regional footprint. And so waste could be one where it's just to reduce costs and maximize service delivery. So it's an option.
Okay. Councillor Carr.
I'm just going to say on that topic, don't we share IT services with Harrogate, for example? Don't we share HR services with North Yorkshire? I mean, there are quite a few.
Yeah, there are some shared services, yeah.
Yeah, quite a few shared services which presumably will come under this this clause. Yeah.
Yeah, as I say, I'm just personally uncomfortable with things like certain circumstances because I just don't think they really. I don't think they make clear where the limitations are or where the powers and authority are, but you know, it is a straight lift.
It is a straight lift. From a legal perspective, if you do joint arrangements, there is a significant number of financial and legal implications and contracts that you have to sort of enter into for delivery of service that also include break clauses and suspension and ability to bring services back. So it is legally not very easy to do, but
is it worth just adding subject to all legal requirements being satisfied?
Okay.
I mean, don't you know, just don't put it in just because I've suggested it, but I mean, what do we think? Well, should there be some clarification? Councillor Carr.
Well, presumably we wouldn't do it illegally, would we, Chair? I mean, you know, the underlying ethos is that we do everything legally, surely.
Yeah, well, that's the underlying ethos. But I mean, I'm happy to leave it out if you don't think it's relevant. Councillor Lomas.
Just I don't know if it helps or not, but obviously in the introduction, section 1.1, it actually goes through the sort of legal framework for this. So I don't know if that provides some level of reassurance that there is a legal framework that governs such arrangements. It wouldn't just be a kind of an ad hoc thing.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, fine. Fine. So if there's nothing there on 21, we'll now move to 23.
So this has not previously featured in the Constitution, but it has featured on the Council's website, and this has not been amended. This is a taken from the website and now included in the Constitution for transparency.
Right, I've got quite a few things on this one, but before I bring them up, are there any observations from Councillor Lomas?
I just want to clarify what we're actually talking about here, because it says Article 23 Independent Remuneration Panel, but in my copy, Remuneration Panel is Article 22 and Article 23 is officers. So
Yeah.
I just got myself a bit in a pickle.
It should have been officers. There was a problem with ward committees being in our papers. It messed all the numbering up.
So which article are we looking at?
Officers.
IRP, Independent Remuneration Panel.
Are we?
Yes.
Oh, well, I haven't even looked at that one.
It's quite short. Don't worry. Don't worry.
It's very
Chair.
short.
It's short.
This has not been amended at all. This is taken from the Council's website and included in the Constitution for transparency reasons.
Right.
It links in with the member allowances details, which are later in the Constitution. So that I've not altered this at all. I've just literally taken it from the website.
All right. Well, I'm going to be guided by everybody else now because I haven't looked at.
So this is standard. This is kind of a standard terms of reference for an IRP.
Right. Councillor Fisher.
To reassure you, Chairman, I've had a good look at it and I can't find anything significant to querying it.
Cool. Right. Well, in which case we'll accept whatever number that one is. Is it 22 or 23 now?
23.
That one's 23. Right. 24 now then is officers. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. 24 officers, Jamie.
Right, so this is taken from the current existing Article 13 of the current Constitution, which was amended by yourselves in March 2020 to correct amendments to job descriptions, etc. So this is taken from Article 13 on officers. All I've done is kind of Article 13 in the current Constitution goes on to talk about many other things, and just kept this defined as to the key officers and their roles and responsibilities. So this covers the head of paid service, the Section 151, the monitoring officer, and the head of internal audit at Verito.
Okie dokie. Right, colleagues, anything from now 24, 3, 4. Councillor Fisher.
Can I just say that I don't want our Chief Finance Officer to think I am in any way impugning her reputation or suggesting that she do anything illegal. But in G, it says where fraud or corruption is identified, to make recommendations for prosecution to the Chief Finance Officer. What in the very unlikely circumstance that a future Chief Finance Officer could commit the fraud, who would then deal with that? Deal with prosecution? Should we have somebody else as a backstop? And I'm not suggesting that our current Chief Finance Officer would ever do that. Please don't think I am. It's just I think we need a backstop in there.
Maybe do you have a view?
That particular section is the monitoring officer in conjunction with the Chief Finance Officer. And so in the even more unlikely scenario that all three of your statutory officers were colluding in that respect, then it is more than one officer, and once the finance restructure is sorted, which will be imminently, then there will be a deputy Chief Finance Officer as well. So there will be that post should it be the chief finance officer that is, doing the fraud? I guess. Yeah.
I hope that didn't offend you in
No
any way.
intention of committing a fraud. I'll just say that as well at this
No, I
point.
know you haven't. I'm quite sure you don't.
Councillor Lomas.
Sorry, I just missed where we were then.
We're in officers now.
Yeah, no, I know we were in officers.
Monitoring officer. It was the powers of the monitoring officer.
Yeah. It's just I looked and there were a few G's.
Yeah.
It's 4.1 G.
Okay.
Councillor Lomas.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right, I've got a couple. Now, Jenny, I've looked at a few other constitutions, and where they describe the structures and the authorities in legislation, they contain a link to the relevant bit of legislation that defines what the powers of a chief executive are, what the powers of a monitoring officer are, and what the powers of a chief finance officer are. So in the monitoring officer and the chief exec, it's the Local Government and Housing Act 1989, Section 4 for chief execs, head of paid service, and 5 for monitoring officers, and for chief finance officers, it's the Local Government Act 1972 and the Local Government Finance Act 1988. Is that correct, Debbie? That defines your powers.
I don't know the exact legislation reference. I've got a link to it somewhere, and there is a SIP for guidance on the role of the chief officer, which is that's the document I use.
On other authorities' constitutions, right. And I just think that could be quite useful, because then if there is the need for a clear definition as laid down in legislation, people can just go straight to a link. Would you be comfortable with incorporating the link to that piece of legislation for those 3 statutory officer roles?
Yeah, because that's the legislation that created the post. So yes, that's fine.
Yeah, cool. So then on B, so this is monitoring officer 4.1B. This section that says such a report will be sent to all members of the council and will have the effect of stopping the proposal or decision being implemented until the report has been considered. That's not actually defined in the legislation in the powers of a monitoring officer. Is that something that's adopted simply for York, or is that because it would be helpful if that is the case, where it could be actually defined, because I did look at that section for all of the roles for the Section 4, Section 5, and the Local Government Act, just to make sure that what was matched, what was described in here was matched in the legislation, and they were, except I couldn't see that reference to it stopping it.
This is if I have to write a formal report as a monitoring officer, where I believe a decision is ultra vires, is going to be unlawful, and I have the ability to stop the decision making until my report has been considered, until I'm satisfied. So it is referenced within the Local Government and Housing Act. The powers are within the Local Government and Housing Act to do that. So this is not a creation just for York. This is direct from legislation.
Right, that's fine.
It's very rare. I'd just like to say, even though I've done it in my career, it is very rare.
Yeah. Oh yeah. In 1.1, it says, yeah, right. All officers other than political assistants, and then blah 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 blah, are known as officers. So it says all officers are known as officers. Is that really what that sentence is supposed to be saying?
Sorry, I'm just looking at something.
So it's 1.1 general.
Yes, it's about the definition again of the reference
So
to
it
officers.
says all officers are known as officers.
And this is the paragraph that is this just says staff. The original in the current constitution says staff who advise or implement council decision are known as officers. So I think I've just put too many officers in. So I can just say staff who are, and then put it as officers. So yeah, that's fine.
And then
Sorry, Chair. Can you direct me to where you were looking there? I couldn't.
Sorry, 1.1.
1.1.
In
The
officers.
last sentence.
So, well, it's a very long officers who advise on or implement council decisions are known as officers.
Sorry, I was you kept saying all officers, so I was stuck on an earlier sentence.
Sorry, no. I meant the last sentence. 1.2. Yes, it says head of internal audit Verito. I think Verito ought to be in brackets.
Okay.
2.1. Certain legislation requires the council to designate a particular officer as proper officer. Should we define what the legislation is?
That's actually quite hard to do because there's multiple legislation. It is, unless it's different.
What that defines a proper officer?
Yeah, that would take me weeks and weeks and weeks to do that. So it is easier to do the presumption of proper officer for for any legislation that comes up.
Yeah, cool. Right, is there anything else anybody else has picked up on? No. Councillor Fisher.
Yeah, page 191 down at the bottom below 6G. And in doing so, the head of internal audit and members of their officers, I'm not sure what that will have rights of access. I'm not sure what that means. Is it a misprint?
Yeah, that's just a typing error. So it's the head of internal audit and their staff essentially. So yes.
Okay, that's fine, as long as we get that clear.
Yeah, well spotted. I missed that one. Right, so we'll accept that with those amendments. So the next one is Article 24. Finance, contracts and legal matters.
So,
Chair, just before we get to 24, could I just clarify what is Article 22 then?
22 was ward committees, and ward committees isn't in. So when this gets redrafted, ward committees is going to get dropped from the constitution altogether.
Right. Okay.
But it was in the original draft, but then it wasn't. It was in the original table, in the original numbering, but wasn't incorporated, and that numbering has then knocked every other bit of numbering subsequent to it out.
And just to clarify as well, the page numbering won't necessarily at the top won't necessarily feature in the constitution going forward because it's going to appear on the website in individual chapters. So it will look different in its final guise. So article I forgot where we are now. Sorry.
24, which is finance, contracts and legal matters.
Yes, finance, contracts and legal matters. So this is taken from Article 15 of the current constitution, and we are legally required to set this out. And so this is standard wording, and I've not changed this apart from put different cross references into appendices, etc.
Yeah. Anything there? No, I didn't pick anything up there. And then review and revision of the Constitution, which I think you're also making reference to. in 2.2, should it say member rather than councillor on the last line?
Okay.
It seems to be in the next sentence, it talks to member ethics, and then for some reason you throw councillor in there. And I just think for consistency, it ought to say member.
Yeah, it's because councillor is the word used in the current constitution.
Right.
So that's the bit that's picked up and placed in this one. So that is the wording in the existing constitution. So yes, we can just amend that. That's fine.
Yeah. Cool. Anything else from that article? Nope. And then the final one is suspension, interpretation and publication of the Constitution. I didn't have anything on that.
This is again standard. So this is taken from the current constitution, and the only thing that has been altered is the cross-referencing.
Yeah. Fine. Right. Appendices. So this is quite a long one. This is Debbie's. So we're on Appendix 10 now.
So this is the financial procedurals and the contract procedurals. I'm assured by Debbie that she's very happy with these as they stand at the moment, and it's usually for the Audit and Governance Committee to look at these as at a separate time, and at the request of the Section 151. So I'm not proposing that there is like a major discussion about these this evening, because you usually have these as an actual agenda item of their own for discussion at the recommendation of the Section 151.
Okay. I did have one question though, Debbie. On 3.2D, report where appropriate any breaches of these regulations to members. Any specific members or all of them?
Sorry, Chair, where are you?
3.2D.
Are we on the financial regulations themselves?
Financial procedure rules. I've got page 418. I don't know what page you're on.
Thank you. Oh, yes. Regulations. No, I would include, Audit and Governance Committees where I would report any breaches generally. If there were any significant breaches of the regulations, it would be to this committee that I would be reporting them.
So would it be worth saying to members of the Audit and Governance Committee? That's what I thought you were referring to.
Yeah. Yeah, we could. Yes, we could. Because I suppose if it was significant, I might also report it to the executive member responsible for finance. Okay. So I would probably include the executive member as well. Yeah. I think that's why we probably left it as members, because it would be, you know, depending on what it was. But happy for that to say, yeah, Audit and Governance Committee.
Yeah, cool. Right. So then. Right, people might think this is really picky. Oh, Councillor Webb.
It's just a question on, I think, I remember these financial procedure rules coming to us as a committee. Is there a reference to regularly they come? Is it annually or once a municipal cycle, or do we want to put something in there? And that is picky, I know, but.
We could, I mean, you can, I suppose you could, you know, it would be as and when anything changed. So in my view, they wouldn't change that often because they are standard rules of procedure, and I wouldn't expect to be changing the financial procedures particularly regularly. The sort of things that would change regularly are the sort of things I would possibly do under delegated authority and report back, and that would be things like changing the names of particular officers or directorates or that kind of thing. So
yeah, so is there a way we can make reference to that? Because I think that I'd agree. I think you know, we only need to see this so often, don't we?
Yeah.
I think that would make sense.
Yeah, we can talk with Jenny. It'd just be something about, you know, as appropriate. So they would come to you when I, as the Section 151 officer, I guess, felt that there was something significant that, you know, or it would be in response to an issue, wouldn't it? Any legislative changes, for example, that might require reflecting.
Right, I've got a couple of things, and you know, I hope this isn't being overly picky. In Part A, there's a lot of gender pronouns in there. You know, it says the CF in paragraph 6, the CFO can choose to delegate his day-to-day responsibilities.
No, it's not picky. We haven't reviewed it for that. You're right. I'll go back through and review it for those gender pronouns.
Yeah, so 6, 7, and I've mentioned loads of them throughout the whole financial procedure rules.
I'll go through and pick them up and change those. Apologies for that.
Would you mind? That'd be
Not
lovely.
at all.
Thank you. In Part B, should there be any reference to supporting opposition parties with alternative budget planning? So there's a reference to budget planning, and it's what work it'll do with the executive. But there's no reference to working alongside opposition parties for an alternative budget.
Well, that's because you can't really put forward an alternative budget, because you can only suggest amendments to a council motion, can't you really? So we would support you with your you know, amendment to the council motion that sets the budget.
Right. So
We
it doesn't
certainly
need to have any reference there.
I don't believe so, unless you think there's a problem in getting the support or resources.
No, I just wondered if it was worth it. I just wondered if it was worth incorporating. So then I've got 27. Yeah, there's a reference to the CRAM process, and and even in the glossary there was no definition of what CRAM meant.
Yeah, sorry, that needs changing. That's our capital budget process. That used to stand for Capital Resource Allocation Model. In the days when you used to actually get capital resources from the government to allocate.
Oh, I see. Right.
Don't get that anymore, do you? But we still call it CRAM. So yeah, that's just the capital budgeting process. So I can amend that.
Yeah, brilliant. 33. I mean, that's just an indent. That first letter should be. I mean, we are supposed to be spotting typos and things like that. So if you could just move that.
Which paragraph was that?
33.
33.
CFO is indented just one point. And on D, sorry, I'm just going back to D. And you're just going to have to bear with me, Debbie. The third bullet point. Right, yes, the third bullet point, page 455. Remove the verb before financial systems. And competent in the using financial systems. Yeah, it's competent in just using financial systems. Page 456. Sorry, that was a long, convoluted way of just saying delete the.
Chair, could I ask that if...
Sorry, which point is that? Sorry, on 456.
Page 456.
Final bullet point, Debbie. It starts issuing advice, guidance, and procedure notes on the use and maintenance of FMS.
Oh, and in the using of
financial systems, yeah.
Yeah, it should just be in. I would imagine it is in the using of. Yeah, but yes, okay, yeah.
Sorry, Bob.
Chair, in the interest of brevity, could I suggest that if it's a grammar, spelling, punctuation, or typo or something like that, could that just be sent to Janie?
Yeah, more than happy. Well, I've already
as an
sent it in, but yes, that's fine. Right. Anything else then? Nope. So you will go through it then for the gender pronouns. Yeah, cool. Appendix 13.
So this is new. The Committee of Standards in Public Life has indicated it's good practice to include an ethics statement. So this is exactly as it says. It says an ethics statement that anybody coming to work with the council or to want to do business with the council, it's about the treatment and the ethical standards that they can expect from officers. So it's included, it more or less mirrors the Nolan principles.
Anything, anybody? I have nothing.
Okay, so Appendix 19.
19.
This is new. This is the protocol for use of ICT by members and use of resources generally. So it is good practice to include guidance to councillors about the appropriate use of council-owned property. So, for example, if you have a council laptop, do not download pornographic material or do not use it for elections campaigning, etc. So, again, this is part of supporting the ethical governance element for elected members and just offering clarity on the appropriate use of resources.
Thank you. Councillor Fisher.
Very minor point, but in 2.2 it says the equipment provided must be used for all democratic work. Surely that should be may, because you're entitled to use your own equipment for democratic work. I do. I just think
technically, you are supposed to do your council business on a council provided laptop, and that's because if you are holding personal information, you shouldn't be holding personal information on a private matter or council material on a private system. So we're supposed to provide you with a laptop so you can do council business on a council owned equipment, so it complies with GDPR provisions and good information security provisions.
Councillor Lomas.
Yeah, just one thing, Janie, I think your microphone has slipped slightly, so
all right, sorry,
you were just getting a bit faint towards the end there.
I'm probably running out of steam, I think.
Yeah, but I think your microphone had just slipped slightly. So but that sounds to me, Janie, like there could therefore be some significant financial implications of that, if you're suggesting that all members then would need to be provided with that IT, and is that a financial implication? Because I don't think there was anything in the report to highlight that kind of financial implication. Because I have to admit, I had made the same assumption as Councillor Fisher. So that seems to me to be quite a significant change in approach.
So as a monitoring officer, as Director of Governance, I'm quite surprised that we haven't provided members with suitable IT equipment in order to enable you to do your job as a councillor, and therefore ensure that council material, council, you know, your ward business, resident business, etc., is maintained on a council supported network. Normally, when you're elected, you are provided with the appropriate equipment in order to effectively do your job as a councillor. This is something that I'm currently addressing, and with a view to that, elections from May 2023, members should be provided with a laptop in order to fully undertake your council functions, and also not run the risk of breaching any information security issues or GDPR provisions, or be at risk of an accidental data breach that involves your own equipment, or a cybersecurity attack that is in respect of your own equipment and therefore damages your perhaps personal material, which is entirely personal to you as a private individual, as opposed to your work as a counsellor. So this is something that I'm addressing at the moment. But as a monitoring officer, you should be provided with the equipment to do your job effectively.
Councillor Webb.
It is quite standard across other councils that you are provided with equipment.
Thank you, Chair. As a councillor, one of our probably the biggest things we do is talking to members of the public. And in 2.1, it refers to such requirements may include a laptop, tablet, or mobile phone. And just on that note, Janie, I think that's an omission, and I think it's one that I think we need sort of some clarification around. Do we need basically, should it say laptop, tablet, and or a mobile phone? Because I have to say, if I had the choice, you know, they do different jobs, don't they? And the other thing is around mobile phones, you know, is it right that we're using private mobile phones, etc., and stuff like that? That'd be something to consider.
Right, so this was written by ICT because they're much more proficient at what each respective gadget does. So I can go back and ask them just to clarify. In respect of mobile phone, I will always support a member who needs a council provided mobile phone to do your job, because there are issues around your personal safety, and it's about your willingness or not to share your personal mobile number with a large sector of the community, or practically every resident of York. So we have to be mindful of our duty of care towards you in ensuring that you are kept safe. And there's also the bit where you need to keep your private life safe and separate from your life as a counsellor. So for example, I'll use my analogy. If my mum rings me, she rings me on my personal phone, but if Megan, my PA, rings me, she'll ring me on my council phone. So we try to keep some semblance of separation for you. So so we do, this is something that I am currently looking at the moment to ensure members are better equipped.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Councillor Lomas.
Yeah, thanks for that. Really helpful, I think. But I do think we need to make sure that we've appreciated the financial impact of that, which may be quite limited, but maybe less limited. I don't know what the situation is. Certainly when I was elected and when I attended the induction, what was said to us was they would provide equipment if we had no equipment we could use. So I suspect that the expenditure from the council's perspective at the moment is relatively limited. That may have increased during lockdown when people were perhaps working in a different way. But I certainly would want something to come back to us at a future meeting to look at the financial implications of this, and how much of an impact it might have. If it's limited, fine, we don't need to worry about it. If it's not, then it's something that we do need to factor in. I'm just thinking of, you know, we're talking about the Constitution this evening, but we also talk about finance quite a lot.
Yeah, no, I understand. I understand the point about the finances, but you know, from a Constitution perspective, I suppose my question is it in the Constitution that you have to use a council-owned piece of IT to do council business, or is it optional? And if it's in the Constitution that it must be, then you're going to have a hell of a lot of work to do to issue devices to everybody. Councillor Fisher.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I don't use the council laptop is because I was given it, never given any training, because all the systems on it are completely different from the systems on my computer. I can't even send emails in Outlook, or very limited. because I've never used it before. I don't understand it, never been trained. If we're going to factor in and make it that we must use council laptops, there must be full member training to enable us to use them, because as I say, all the systems on it are completely alien to what I use on my own private computer.
Yeah, I don't think that's necessarily part of the Constitution, and I just want to get us back to the Constitution. Is it your contention, Janie, that you want that in the Constitution?
This
it's
protocol.
in there, Chair.
Say again.
It's Appendix 19, Chair. That's why we're discussing it, is because it's there in writing.
No, I know, but
So
my question is: do you now, are you still of the opinion that it has to be in there?
Yes.
Because
there are some
once this is adopted, then that process is going to have to start to take place, isn't it?
We've already provided IT equipment to some members. So some members have refused it. Some members are in receipt of IT equipment. So this is still compliant. This is still very relevant for those members who've got council provided IT equipment. So there is still a proportion of 47 councillors who've got have already got a suite of IT equipment. So this would become relevant. So yes, this does need to stay in. Issues that I'm kind of just more concerned with, really, it's not really a discretion, it's more the overarching information governance legislation, information security legislation, the increased risks of cyber attack. There's an increased risk of personal safety to councillors. We do have to be really adherent, be really mindful of that. And there's also a potential future move towards hybrid working. If we want to work differently, and if the government changes the legislation that allows decision-making meetings to be virtual, for example, or hybrid, we need to provide you with the appropriate technology in order to fully participate and engage in the processes. So, I would strongly recommend that this is included, because some members do already have council provided IT equipment, and therefore it is relevant to those members. Same principles apply around sharing council information. You should only be using your councillor email address and not a private email address for council work and activity. So it's quite a technical area of law around information governance and security.
Okay. Councillor Lomas, you did have your hand. Councillor Lomas, and then I'll go to you, Councillor Carr. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose my request remains the same. Can we then return to the financial implications at a future point in time, and either be reassured that it's minimal and we don't need to worry about it, or be assured that while it's not minimal and we probably do need to concern ourselves with it, it's in hand.
Yeah, I can bring something back on the financial implications.
Thank you. Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Chair. I was just wanting to pick up Janie on her point about personal safety. How does using City Council technology keep us safer? Because obviously we've got to keep our addresses open to the public, our email addresses open to the public, our phone numbers, and so on and so forth. So perhaps Jenny could just sort that situation for me, please.
So you should always be using your councillor provided email address and never a private email address for council business. You should, for safety, preferably be using a council provided mobile telephone number instead of a private mobile telephone number, so that there is a clear distinction between the work you do as a councillor and your private life and the phone calls that you may receive on a private phone. So that gives you the ability to turn one phone off, for example, and still receive calls from your mum or friend, etc., in a private capacity without feeling the guilt or need to keep the phone on at all times. In terms of addresses, you'll see that many major councils, so for example Manchester, don't actually publish your home addresses, and all contact details are via member services or via democratic services. The monitoring officer is required to keep a note of all of your home addresses, and if there is a request received if we don't publish it on the website and we say contact us via member services, for example, or democratic services, if we're required to provide details of your address, then I would obviously consult with you and say that a request has been received, and we would deal with that on a case-by-case basis. But there's quite a few measures that we can put in place just to try and go some way to protect your personal well-being as well. Obviously, other measures are, we'd advise you to contact the police, speak to them about support that you need as well. So there's quite a wide range of measures in place.
If I can just come back on that, Chair. Yes, I agree with home addresses and so on and so forth. But surely, if we're going to be contacted by residents, then clearly we're going to have to give our council email addresses out, our council mobile phone numbers out. We are here to serve residents, and we are in the front line, as it were. We've got to be contactable, irrespective of who provides the software and the hardware.
Yes, but the issue is council business is property of the council and should be dealt with on hardware provided by the council, so that you have safe ownership of council property, and then you separate that out from private. So there's also the risk of cyber attack as well, and the risk that if you do council business and you are the victim of a online attack, then that could also damage your personal information that you hold on your IT equipment, for example. So it is about keeping issues safe. It's also about breaches of information as well, and how that breach occurred, and the risks and the potential fines, for example, from the ICO, or risk of criminal proceedings around breaches of information as well. So it's quite a long-winded area. I'm happy to discuss with members outside of this meeting, as I'm conscious that we've been sat
I'm
here
just
for
not
quite a
sure
while.
that we're actually suggesting any amendments to the Constitution. So if that's okay, I'm going to move on to Appendix 20.
Yep, so this is the member allowances and member allowances scheme. So this is the current scheme of City of York, and obviously it's the one that is considered by the IRP. So this is here for noting, and we're including it because it's good practice to include it in the council's constitution.
Great. Any comments? Apart from J, we've now changed the name of area sub-planning.
We will do, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other amendments to that? No. So then we go into 21.
Sorry, just making a note.
Which is the urgent decision-making protocol.
So this is the protocol that was issued during the national lockdown. It's included here because it did form part of our constitution from March 2020, and also details the urgent decision-making processes. I've not amended this at all. This is as was approved during the national lockdown.
Yeah. In 4A, could you just take the gender pronouns out again?
Yes.
As Debbie is doing with the finance one. Any other amendments to that, Councillor Webb?
It's just a question. If this was something that was an emergency power, was that something that was like time limited, and therefore is it right that it would sit in our constitution, or is this now in here forever?
No, this is now formally part of the current constitution, and so it's been transferred into this one. So it is until a future full council amends it, or there's legislation that amends these provisions. This is it.
25. Yes, 25.
So this is the senior management structure. This is just for information of what our chief officer structure looks like.
Just one picture.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm taking nobody's got any corrections to that. 26.
26, this is new, and this is just around clarity for anybody, a member of the public who reads this, around our information governance statement, our commitment to working with the GDPR principles, who our data protection officer is, which is Lorraine, and also it's how to complain or how to comment or how to compliment and how to give feedback as part of the 4 Cs, which this committee approved in April of this year, or last year, this year, yes.
Should it have a link to the Ombudsman service on it?
Can do if you like, but this is just unique to York before you get to that process, but we can include it if you like.
Yeah, I just thought it would. It's a form of information governance. It was just a handy reference, I thought. 27.
It's a requirement to include protocol in the Constitution as to how monitoring officers go about monitoring and reviewing the Constitution. So this is written following our previous discussions, and these are the steps I may take as part of my review process.
Anything? Nope. 28 then, and this is the final one. Protocol on the production and content of minutes of meetings.
So this is new to the council's constitution, and it's here for discussion by members of the committee.
Councillor Fisher.
Thank you. Can I just say how much I welcome on page 70433, hang on, sorry, can't find which one it is. It's the bit that says that officers will be listed. I think that's incredibly useful, because the number of times I've had to go through YouTube videos to find which officer gave some advice. Every other council I've ever served on has had that, and I think that is something that's critical. I asked for it earlier and was told I couldn't have it, but I'm pleased to see it's in there now.
Yep.
Good. Excellent. Councillor Lomas.
I'm sorry, Councillor Fisher, can you just point me to where you were?
Sorry, 705.51B. It says a listing of member and officer.
All right,
attendees.
thank you.
Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Chair. This just a little bit of clarity really around the minutes of meetings, because I know there's been a conversation about forums and formal scrutiny meetings and things like that. Could I just get assurances that both of those are covered by this, and we'll get like minutes and stuff?
Yes, we do minutes of forum meetings of scrutiny, yes.
And that's yeah, and that's sort of referenced in here, is it? That sort of.
Yeah, there's a lot more detail in the scrutiny sections.
Yeah, thought so. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, that's the bit that we're covering tonight. But your work hasn't finished. There's more. Councillor Lomas, do you need a break? Should we be having a break?
I wasn't going to say that.
Oh, sorry.
But it's we're probably going to be coming up to time for a little break, I think. But I was just going to say, are we going to deal with the report, or are we doing that at the end? I was just not clear on where we're at, because we jumped straight into the sections of the revised constitution, but so I wondered what, because we sort of skipped over the report bit and there were just a couple of points.
Oh right, okay, yeah, absolutely. No, we can do that. Well, there is another bit that we still need to do.
Okay.
And maybe we'll have a break, but then when we come back, we need you to have some thoughts about the work that the cross-party working group came up with. As you know, we split on the suggestion of the committee. we constituted an informal working party that met on a number of occasions. It was not a formal group, so Councillor Fisher and myself have a series of suggestions which we will bring up on a chart for your thoughts and hopefully approval. But why don't we have a little break until maybe it's 10 past? It's 3 minutes past now. So like 7 minutes, is that okay, or does people want more? Great. And we will look at the report in full. So should we do that, the preface to the report before we look at the work of the working party? Is that okay, Councillor Lomas?
Yes, whichever. I just wasn't clear
No,
how we
no,
were
no, you're
working
absolutely
through
right
it.
to
So.
have, no, you're absolutely right to have flagged it up. No, no, of course you were. So right, see you all at 10 past. Thank you and welcome back, and sorry for the slight delay in getting back to you. So the final area that we need to look at on the Constitution was the work of the working party, the cross-party working party, that looked into articles and appendices that did not have to be held by and considered by Audit and Governance. Janie, do you want to speak to that, or do you want me to do that?
No, I'm happy to, Chair, if you wish. So the Audit and Governance Committee asked for the cross-party working group to be established at the September meeting. The cross-party working group met more or less weekly throughout October and into early November. And their feedback on the items which the Chair and Vice Chair asked the cross-party working group to be considered appear from pages 27 to the end of this agenda item on page 40 for consideration by members of Audit and Governance. There is still a lot of work to be done, because there's areas of requirements for me to reword. There is some typographical amendments to be made, some gender pronoun issues to resolve, and general observations. And so the working document that we've been working from this evening will be updated shortly to encompass all of the feedback that we've received, and then the ultimate decision making rests with Audit and Governance Committee. So the Audit and Governance Committee has to be happy with the entirety of the Constitution in order to make a recommendation to full council. If, however, as we've already discovered at earlier meetings, there are areas which cannot be decided upon by Audit and Governance, those will be highlighted to full council, and full council will be asked to adjudicate on the ultimate content of the Constitution for those particular areas. So I'm also mindful that we've still got a particular area to consider, Chair, as well, before the entire draft can be concluded. So which is scrutiny.
Yes, yes. Councillor Lomas.
Thank you, Chair. I just in your introduction there, you said that we'd delegated work to the working group where it didn't need to be looked at by Audit and Governance, but that wasn't my recollection. I think we just said that it wouldn't be possible for Audit and Governance in our meetings to do all of the work on this, and it seemed appropriate to have a cross-party working group, and then we suggested some ways that we might divide up the work, but in fact for some of the things in the that have been looked at by the cross-party working group are things that we looked at our last meeting of Audit and Governance. So it wasn't things that we didn't have to look at got given to the cross-party working group. It was they were supporting the work to be done at Audit and Governance. So I just wanted to clarify, because that was my understanding. It wasn't my understanding that they would only be looking at things that we wouldn't concern ourselves with. We are concerned with all of the Constitution, but it wouldn't be possible for us to deal with every page of the Constitution in Audit and Governance meetings directly, because otherwise they would be significantly longer than they already are. So I think that's important to sort of make sure we've got a shared understanding of. As I say, I could have misunderstood.
Well, maybe I misunderstood, Councillor Lomas, because my understanding of what you and others were saying were that that Audit and Governance couldn't cover all the sections, and perhaps a working party could look at other sections. And so therefore, myself, Councillor Fisher, and the monitoring officer looked at the Constitution as a whole and felt there were certain areas that were suitable for the working party to look at in detail and report back on. That was my understanding.
So
I think that was
my understanding too, Chair. But what you just said in your intro suggested a difference, and also looking at what has come back from the working party, they appear to have looked at a lot of the same things that we looked at our meetings. So
I'm not sure that they. Can you point to me an area that
Article 3
the working party has looked at that we've also looked at?
Article 3, Article 7.
Chair, if I can just clarify, some of the members of the cross-party working group actually looked at the entire constitution and gave feedback, and all the feedback was incorporated, even though they weren't asked to look at all of the constitution. So there's a couple of members who did give feedback on respect of the entirety of the constitution, regardless of the list that the chair and vice chair provided. So we've included it.
I also think, Chair, I think it's important to make the point that Audit and Governance is concerned with the whole of the Constitution. So
I never for a minute implied that it wasn't.
Okay.
I didn't feel that I had. If I had, I apologise. I really apologise if I gave that impression. The reason that I said that the areas that I didn't feel that were necessary for us to concentrate on were that there were some things like the financial regulation rules that absolutely fell into the ambit of audit and governance. So perhaps I didn't make myself as clear as I could have been, and I apologise for that. Councillor Webb.
Thank you. See, as we got this document in front of us, and I don't intend to go through all of it, and I'm personally happy to trust members of this cross-party working group to have taken the time to do it. And I'd like to think that Janie will take on board some of the points. So obviously we've got what the monitoring officer's comments are, and then what the working group decision is on the comments agreed. We've got several points where there is no sort of decision from the working group, and I assume that will come in time. And so my question is in terms of timescales, we are expecting further working group decisions on the ones that are blank, plus further comments, I imagine, from Janie as monitoring officer. And then those would be then incorporated along with the things that we've said tonight and in previous meetings into a new tracked changed version of the Constitution that would come to us on the 1st of December. Alongside a discussion about scrutiny committees, which we might also wish to discuss. Yeah. And then you're suggesting that the whole thing would go to all 47 councillors for the 16th of December full council meeting. Is that right?
If we've reached that stage, and
yeah, because
there's no there's no clarity yet as to whether we have reached that stage. It won't go any further until everybody is happy with the revisions, with the track changes, and they are prepared. So apart from the items where there is no agreement,
so my
needs to be debated and voted on at full council.
Thank you. So my point would be, is it reasonable? I mean, I'm just thinking right here, right now, you're talking about 2 weeks. Is it reasonable to ask all members of council to have gone through this entire document? Because, there will be some members of council who've never seen this before in that 2-week period. Right now, here and now, I would say no, and therefore I would propose that actually it would seem more feasible to push this final say for full council back to the next full council meeting, where it would be appropriate, which would probably be March, I guess. But that would be my suggestion right now.
Thank you. Councillor Lomas.
Thanks, Chair. And I share a lot of the sentiments that Councillor Webb has just expressed. I think about the amount of work, you know, looking through the comments in this table, there's an awful lot where there is work still to be done. It highlights something to be done and suggests agreement will be needed, or suggesting things to change, but no kind of clarity on what might be changing and how. So I think that's something I would want to see before being content with it. I also this takes me back to the question I asked just before we went for a break about the report that sort of starts this agenda item off. Sure. Because the recommendations are that that we should consider this. And then on page 18 under options, it says Audit and Governance Committee can choose to disregard the recommendations, in which case the existing constitution will remain in force, and we get a warning about that situation. But it seems to me that we're not, that it's not as simple as it is being presented there. I think that we don't need to disregard the recommendations. I think we could just make a decision that we don't believe that in 2 weeks' time we will have had the opportunity to absorb all of the information required. And if another version of the Constitution is to come out with changes to be made as yet unidentified, that nobody has kind of seen yet, because we haven't seen the product of that work that went on in the working group as yet, in a lot of areas, then surely, as Councillor Webb has just suggested, the answer is to allow more time for the entire process, and allow that time for us to be able to read the information, to consider all of the outcomes of that work being done by the cross-party working group, but also reflecting back on the public speakers at the last meeting, to allow for some level of public scrutiny of the Constitution, of the changes being proposed, because as things stand, I can foresee that the changes being done between now and our next meeting on the 1st of December, which is 2 weeks tomorrow, would likely be released at the very last minute, allowing us not very much time to read it and absorb it, but also equally not allowing anyone else to be able to read it and look at it. And I think that one of the reasons for trying to push this through as soon as we possibly can is valid, which is because of the public interest report. But remembering that the public interest report focused largely on declarations of interest, which has already been addressed. The LGA Model Code of Conduct has already been adopted by full council and now stands, whether or not the entire constitution is reviewed. And while of course there will be other things in the constitution that we will want to make sure fit in with the approach we need to take following the public interest report, I think that the most significant issue has been addressed, and we have taken action on that already. And I can't see what difference it would make whether we adopt our brand new constitution in December or in March, if that means that we don't then have to kind of go to the very next full council and say, oops, we made a mistake. But I do have a bit of a concern that we're being presented with comments from the cross-party working group, for whose work we are immensely grateful, obviously, for going through all of that detail in those 800 pages and coming up with their comments. But if we haven't resolved the comments, then that piece of work isn't yet finished, is it? There is more to do.
Now, I take the point, absolutely. Councillor Fisher.
Yeah, I think the purpose, thank you, Chair. I think the purpose of the cross-party working group was to identify areas where there were issues and comments made and try and resolve as many of them as we possibly could. We didn't resolve all of them. There are things that are not agreed. We still wait for a critical area, which is scrutiny. There are other few areas, like some comments from Councillor Looker, which are on the first page of the table. I think we'll be very optimistic if we get it through for December the 16th. My view is it takes as long as it takes to get it right, because we want to get it right. And if that means waiting a little while, that's fine by me. If we can get it done by December 16th, everything tied up, everyone happy with it, fine. But let's not rush it. There's a huge amount of information. I'm well aware that I should think probably 25 of the councillors have never even seen this document. They may not have had time to look at it. You know, let's just make sure that everybody is on board and everybody knows what's going on and there are no issues that we have to sweep up, you know, a couple of months down the line.
Granted, yeah. You know, as I think I've said repeatedly, this will take as long as it takes, and you know, it's clear that, you know, how long we spent tonight, and on the first we've got to cover scrutiny, and hopefully there will be a report from the chair of CSMC, and he will be in a position to talk to that report. It still leaves us very little time to go through those and then consider all the revisions that we've discussed as part of the working parties group, working parties work. So no, I take the point. I always felt that it was optimistic to try to go for December. I mean, I think we've done an incredible amount of work in you know, a relatively short period of time. I'm immensely grateful to all the members of this committee and of the working party. But you know, I do feel that we don't want to spoil the ship for a ha'porth of tar, and therefore, you know, I think we do need to give it the consideration that it deserves. Councillor Fisher.
I also think, thank you, Chair, I also think we should bear in mind the work-life balance of our monitoring officer, who I'm sure will get the constitution ready, but, you know, I think it's an enormous amount of work, and I don't think we should pressure an officer unreasonably.
No, it's also a good point. Jenny.
Chair, can I just have some clarification as to what you expect at the meeting on the 1st of December, because I've technically got to have a report available for publication on this coming Friday, and as
very difficult.
which is virtually impossible for me to turn around for all the reasons that you've all just stated. So I would need Chair's permission to submit a late report. However, I'm also hampered because I do not yet have any views from the chairs of scrutiny as to what comments they may be making. So is it acceptable, given the comments that you've made, that you restrict the discussion of the Constitution just to the scrutiny elements, the relevant article and the appendices just on scrutiny, which allows me a little bit more time and therefore not in breach of publication rules to make a really concerted effort on the amendments to the Constitution? I'm also mindful I'm responsible for the delivery of 2 by-elections next week.
What do we think? Are we happy? Are we happy for to give Jenny more time and just to look at scrutiny when it comes back on the, when it comes to us on the 1st, and then we can look at we can look at it again in a future meeting. Councillor Lomas.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just want to check that I properly understand what's being suggested. So the suggestion then would be that we look at scrutiny, the scrutiny section only at our next meeting in 2 weeks' time, and then we look at all of the other elements at a future meeting once I think I would happily say we've all had chance to do a bit more work on it, Janie, because I don't think it's just about you writing a report. It's us then reading it and doing it justice, to be able to then come back and discuss it at a future meeting. I mean, I think I would be happy with that, as long as it's then clear that it's, you know, this is not going to go to council in December, on the 16th of December.
No, I think that's pretty much a given. I mean, I'm taking that from everybody. I know not everybody's commented, but I think that there's enough of a consensus that it's unlikely that we're going to be able to hit the 16th of December, any sort of deadline for that. Does everybody agree with that? There is a question though that I do need to ask, given what Jamie's said and what Councillor Lomas has just outlined, is if we look at scrutiny and have discussion about that and reach some sort of consensus on the first. The next meeting we have after December is the 2nd of February. If there's going to be a process, a period of public consultation, which has been suggested, how do you envisage that to take place, and in what format? I'd be really interested in canvassing the views of colleagues. I've got Councillor Webb first, and then Councillor Lomas.
Thank you, Chair. I think for me, if we do on the 1st of December, we do the scrutiny thing. It gives Janie and the working party a chance to sort of finish their discussions and come up with this track change document. And as soon as that is ready, I'd be of the opinion, could that not be published, ready for the A&G in February? And that way, it is published as early as it possibly can be. Therefore, if members of the public wish to comment on it, they're given a reasonable amount of time to do so. Sign up for public participation at our meeting in February. Whereas, if this is plonked in front of you a week in advance of the meeting, as a member of the public, you're not really given a realistic amount of time to look through it. Whereas if you're so minded, putting it up as soon as you possibly could would help. And as we were suggesting previously that it was meant to come to a meeting in December the 16th, surely, it shouldn't be too hard to do it maybe a month in advance, say.
Councillor Lomas.
Yeah, thanks. I was going to say a very similar thing. I think in terms of public scrutiny, it's just about publishing the information, the papers, in plenty of time to allow for members of the public to have a chance of being able to read it. And I think that if we allow more time, a greater time span for getting it ready, that should, as Councillor Webb pointed out, that should allow for a longer period. And then I'm certain that members of the public who had an interest would make their views known to members of the committee. They can speak in public participation at the relevant meeting should they wish to. They will then be ready, if you like, to contribute when council looks at the matter too. But I just would want to make sure we had appropriate meeting dates for audit and governance that would allow us to fit in with all of that, as well as making sure that there is time for preparing the papers.
Councillor Fisher and then Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jeff. I think there are simple and easy ways to do this without incurring a huge amount of cost. I mean, the Chair and I had some discussion about how we would do any public consultation. I think we agreed that we can do this online. You put it on the website, on the council's website. You put a link to a website where they can put any comments that people want to submit, and it can be done at minimal cost. I'm not suggesting send a copy of the Constitution to every 90,000 or 100,000 households. You know, that's just, most people wouldn't want to read it. Might use a doorstop or something, but you know, there will be some people who want to make informed comments, who have expertise, who might pick up things we've missed. Fine, put it on the website, offer comments available, job done.
Councillor Webb.
Just while we're talking about timeframes, I think it's important that for whichever full council this comes to, I imagine that would maybe be the March one, we do a similar thing that actually, you know, the statutory notice period, we put this up as far in advance as we possibly can, and you know, potentially use the council's press office to highlight that it is up in advance. And I think that again gives people a chance to look at it and comment. And it will also help those who haven't looked at it.
Yeah, that's my only concern, is that, you know, whilst we're obviously deeply involved in this, you know, not many people will be aware that there's a constitution review that's ongoing, that it's in draft form, that we are welcoming public comments and suggestions. And so, you know, I think it's absolutely right to do it online. But how are we going to make this known to the wider public of York, that it is out there and it is available, and you know that we do welcome the comments? I just wondered if anybody got any thoughts on that. Oh, everybody's got a thought on it. Janie had a hand up first, then Councillor Carr, and then Councillor Webb.
So there's a couple of issues. We can put a press release out. That's not a problem to say that it's there on the council's website early. However, if we receive a lot of comments very close to the meeting, it doesn't allow any time for the Audit and Governance Committee to consider the plethora of comments we may receive. It doesn't allow for consideration of whether there's any changes, and it's just where is the forum where any public feedback would be undertaken, because I'm not sure that the Lord Mayor would afford, it's like 4 hours, for example, to discuss the Constitution, and if we got sort of 20 comments back from the public, and I'm not sure what the agenda may be in March, so we'd obviously have to consult with the Lord Mayor, but there does also need to be, if we do receive a lot of comments, build in a kind of response forum for this committee, unless it's done by virtual means of emailing around the views of the committee, so I'm just mindful of that as well. So if we have the public consultation, receive public views, how do you feedback on those or get a view on those, unless you want it done live in a meeting?
Thanks, Jenny. Let's hold that thought. Councillor Carr.
I was about to say the same thing, Chair, really. I mean, we could put a press release out to say that, you know, there's going to be a survey online, as Councillor Fisher has said. I think we will get some very valid comments back, but I don't think the vast majority of the population of York will be exercised by changes in the Constitution. So we may get some very deep and valid responses, but I don't think we'll get a wide range of responses.
Yeah. Councillor Webb, and then did Councillor Fisher have his hand up? No. Councillor Lomas after that. So Councillor Webb first, and then Councillor Lomas.
Well, I think it's a case of timing, Janie, isn't it? I think that you're right to say that, you know, we have to have some way of taking feedback and responding to it, and whether that's us as A&G, which I think would make more sense. The track changes document can come out. It can be published on the website. People could feedback through the appropriate email address. Those comments could be summarised for our the next A&G meeting, and then from that point on, we could obviously, you'd imagine, as Councillor Carr's just said, that we're talking about some few but deep comments that we could discuss, and then at that point that would go to the appropriate full council.
Okay, I'm going to go to Councillor Lomas, and then I'm going to go to Janie, and then we're going to have to make some conclusions.
Sorry, Chair, I should have taken my hand down because I was about to say pretty much the same thing as Councillor Webb, that we should try to look at this audit and governance, including the public scrutiny aspect, and not wait till it goes to full council.
Yeah, no, of course. Janie.
Can I just make an observation that the current draft of the Constitution has been on the council's website because it's a published document of this committee, and this committee has circulated its work plan and openly discussed its work plan. And since September, when we had our first meeting, I'm yet to receive a single public comment on the Constitution. So this draft, we've discussed it at every single public meeting of this committee. It's been on the work plan, which is published. The draft is available in the September meeting, and it's still there. But I have not yet received a single comment from any interested member of the public around this Constitution to even consider to bring back to yourselves. Likewise, there's some members who have not provided any feedback at all as well, who have seen it. So just thought I should highlight that it is publicly available at the moment for any member of the public who wants to see it on the September agenda of this committee. And I'm yet to receive any comments. Unless members here have received some comments that you could kindly pass on, that would be helpful.
I haven't. So, I hear what you say, Janie, but I think the view of committee is that after we finished in December, and that the reports, the draft, revised draft version of the Constitution be put up on the council's website, and that a press release goes out inviting comments, and that any comments that come in, there has to be a closing date for this, and it's got to be at least 2 weeks before our February the 2nd meeting to give you time to collate them, and then to incorporate them into a report that we look at on the 2nd of February. Does everybody agree? Yeah. All right, well, that's what we'll do. That's what I think we should do then. Which then takes us to the work plan, which is agenda item 6. Our next meeting we've already discussed at some length, but will be a very big meeting, and this will be a decision-making meeting. We've got the final statement of accounts, which is incredibly important, and therefore we've got also the attended Mazars external report. Debbie.
I just wondered, Chair, we had key corporate risks at this meeting, and I wondered if the committee would be amenable to us deferring Monitor 3 to the February meeting.
I think
yeah, it's okay. Thank you.
Yeah. It was one of the questions I was going to ask. Equally, the corporate governance report.
Chair, that could be deferred to the February meeting. That then would allow time for the discussion of the scrutiny elements of the Constitution, and also afford sufficient time for the statement of accounts and the annual governance statement. That needs to be
which we
discussed.
have to do.
And we also have the Local Government Association attending on the 1st of December as well to give the first response on the scoping report. So if we could move the corporate governance report, that would be of assistance.
Do we all agree? And the final one that I wanted an opinion on was the internal, the Verito report. We had one in September. Do we want to hear another one, or can we put that one off until either February or March? We've got very little in March. Debbie, do you have a view, Janie?
If we can fit it in, I mean, it's just in February. You'll be looking at the audit plan for the year ahead. So March might be a little late because it'll be the audit plan for the year ahead.
Because we've already got the plan and consultation and the counter fraud framework. Do you want to put the internal audit and fraud plan in there?
Well, you could do, and then February could be a risks and audit meeting, couldn't it? Essentially, is in that kind of theme.
And looking at this final drafted, commented on, consulted on constitution. Everybody cool with that? Right. And then we'll think about what we drop and put into March as we get there. Is that okay? Great. Well, in that case, I think this has now concluded this meeting. Is there any other urgent business? I haven't got any. No. Well, thank you very much indeed, everybody. It's 20:51. You've all been incredibly patient. We've done a really, really excellent piece of work, I think, this evening. And thank you all for your time and efforts. So that's formally the end of the meeting.
Just want to say sorry for arriving late.